Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. There was no grand beginning. No soft piano music in the background or the smell of fresh-cut flowers. No significant look or lingering touch that should have tipped me off. It was just another evening, another corporate event that I had no intention of attending. Let me explain. I don't do corporate events. I don't network. I don't like small talk, and I sure as hell don't wear suits unless absolutely necessary. So when my wife, Lena, mentioned that she needed me to come with her to some fancy corporate gathering, I made it clear it wasn't my scene. Her response was simple: I don't want to go alone. And that was all it took. You see, I'm not the most exciting husband. I'm not the one who charms everyone in the room or wins awards for being Mr. Personality. But I am reliable. I show up when it counts, even if I'd rather be at home watching some trashy documentary on Netflix. So, I reluctantly threw on my suit, the one I only wear for weddings or funerals, and tagged along. Not because I wanted to be there, but because I understood that sometimes marriage is about showing up for the people you love, even when you'd rather be anywhere else. The event was at a sleek downtown hotel, the kind with mirrored walls and a constant hum of conversation that never seemed to stop. Lena, as usual, looked stunning in her sharp black dress, her hair perfectly styled. Everyone in the room seemed to gravitate toward her, like she had some invisible pull. I didn't blame them. She was beautiful, smart, and confident, everything I wasn't. But there was something in the air that night, a kind of tension, not a physical one, but an underlying current of something that made my skin crawl. We mingled, we laughed, we made small talk with colleagues and acquaintances. But in the back of my mind, there was something I couldn't quite pinpoint, that bothered me. A sense of being watched. It wasn't until later that I understood why. Lena had slipped away to speak with someone from her team. I was left alone at the bar, nursing a drink and trying to keep my mind from wandering. That's when he appeared. He wasn't a typical corporate type, not in the traditional sense. He wasn't one of those guys in a perfectly tailored suit who had perfected the art of shaking hands and making deals. No, this guy was different. He had an energy about him, a kind of casual confidence that almost felt like a threat. He slid into the seat next to me without asking. Not that I would have said anything if he had. Hey, he said, looking me over with a smirk that made me uneasy. You with Lena, right? I glanced at him, took a slow sip of my drink, and nodded. Yeah. She's something, isn't she? He added, his voice low, almost a murmur. He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like it was a statement of fact, like there was something beneath it that I wasn't supposed to question. I stayed silent. Something about his tone rubbed me the wrong way, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Lucky guy, he said, his eyes flicking back toward Lena as she laughed with a few others across the room. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, a look that lingered just a moment too long. I tried to laugh it off. Yeah, I guess. But he wasn't done. I bet you don't realize just how many guys here are trying to get close to her, huh? The words hit me like a slap in the face, but I kept my cool. This guy was just trying to get a rise out of me. It wasn't the first time I'd overheard people talking about Lena, admiring her, making remarks about how lucky I was. But this guy's words were different. The casual way he spoke about my wife made my skin prickle. I'm sure she gets a lot of attention, I said, keeping my voice steady. But she's married. He chuckled, the sound like gravel scraping against metal. Yeah, but it's different when the attention is mutual. I could feel my blood pressure rise, but I didn't want to escalate things. I knew what this was. He was pushing buttons, testing boundaries, seeing how far he could go without crossing a line. Look, I don't know what your deal is, I started, trying to keep my tone even, but you should probably just back off. But instead of backing off, he leaned in a little closer, his voice dropping lower. You really think she's only interested in you? I don't know, man. I've seen the way she looks at me when she thinks no one's watching. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just some guy trying to make conversation. He was deliberately trying to provoke me. He was testing me. And I was done. I set my drink down on the bar and stood up. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I kept my voice as calm as I could manage. Stay away from my wife, I said. If you value your job, or whatever it is you think you're doing, you need to stay the hell away from her. His smile faltered for just a second, but then he stood up as well, brushing off his jacket like nothing had happened. No need to get so upset, he said with a shrug, his smirk returning. Just having a little fun. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't having fun. He wasn't playing. He was testing a limit, pushing to see if he could break me. I turned and walked away, heading toward the other side of the room where Lena was talking with a few of her colleagues. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Tom had made his move, but now, so had I. And he wasn't going to like what came next. The tension didn't leave me after I walked away from Tom. It wasn't just his words that stuck with me, but the way he said them, so casually, like I wasn't even there. I could still hear his voice in my head. She's only interested in you? I knew I couldn't let it go. I had to address it, but not now. Not here. The last thing I wanted to do was cause a scene at an event that meant so much to Lena. She had worked hard for this recognition, and I wasn't about to let my own insecurities ruin it. But that didn't mean I could shake the feeling of unease that crept up my spine whenever I saw Tom's eyes linger on her. I took a deep breath, pushing it all aside as I walked toward her. She was chatting with a group of colleagues, laughing as if nothing had happened. She caught my eye and smiled warmly, and for a moment, everything felt right again. I watched her for a few seconds, just appreciating how lucky I was to be with someone so confident, so driven. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him again. Tom. He was across the room, talking to someone, but his gaze was fixed right on Lena. And when she glanced toward him, I noticed that small, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. It was the kind of smile that says, I know something you don't. I turned away before Lena could see my reaction, trying to force myself to relax. She wouldn't see it the way I did. To her, it was probably just another casual interaction. But to me, it felt like he was testing the waters, inching closer to crossing a line. I took another drink from my glass, trying to focus on the conversation happening around me. I even smiled and nodded, pretending to be engaged, but my mind kept wandering back to Tom and Lena. Was I overthinking it? Or was there something I missed? A few minutes later, I noticed Lena making her way toward the restroom. I didn't think much of it. She had a habit of excusing herself when she needed a breather from the crowd. But as soon as she disappeared around the corner, Tom followed. My heart rate spiked immediately. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was a crowded event. He was probably just making his way to the bar. But then why did it feel like everything in my body screamed danger? I had to know. I told myself I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't that kind of guy, but I had to at least find out what was going on. I quickly excused myself from the group and headed in the same direction. When I rounded the corner near the hallway leading to the restrooms, I stopped. They were both standing there. Tom was leaning against the wall, talking to Lena in a way that was way too close. She was laughing, but her body language was stiff, a little too stiff. She wasn't looking at him the way she normally looked at people. No, she was looking past him, over his shoulder, as if trying to distance herself from him without being obvious. I felt a pang of relief. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind after all. But there was something else there, too. A cold, hard knot of something else I couldn't ignore. As I stood there, watching them from the shadows, I saw Tom's hand rest on her arm, just a touch. She immediately pulled back, her expression faltering for just a second. But then, before anything could be said, she turned, heading toward the restroom. Tom didn't move. He didn't follow her, but he watched her go. I exhaled, trying to calm myself. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed, but something in the back of my mind whispered that this was far from over. I went back to the main area, trying to act normal, but my mind was racing. I hadn't expected to feel this way. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just brush it off, but every time I saw Tom's eyes on Lena, it felt like I was losing control of something I couldn't name. When Lena came back, she gave me a quick smile, oblivious to the storm swirling in my head. "Everything okay?" she asked, clearly catching the shift in my mood. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just a bit tired, I guess." But inside, my heart was still pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was playing a dangerous game. And whatever it was, I wasn't going to let it continue. I watched him from across the room, his casual demeanor never once slipping. He seemed so sure of himself, like he knew exactly what he was doing. But little did he know, this game wasn't just his. And I wasn't about to let him win. After the brief encounter in the hallway, I tried to shake it off. Lena was back, smiling at me as if everything was fine, and I forced myself to smile back. But inside, a knot was forming. Something wasn't sitting right. I tried to bury the feeling, to convince myself I was overthinking it, but every time I looked at Tom, standing there, so calm, so composed, I couldn't help but feel like there was more to it. Lena was busy now, giving her presentation. I stood at the edge of the room, watching her as she spoke, but my eyes kept drifting back to Tom. He was on the other side of the room, but there was something about him, something about the way he kept looking over at her. It wasn't the casual glance of a colleague admiring someone's work. No, this was something different. It was like he was waiting, watching, sizing up the room, watching her every move. And I could feel his gaze on me too, almost like a challenge, as if he was daring me to do something about it. But I couldn't make a scene. Not here. Not at her big moment. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that had been growing inside me. It wasn't just jealousy. It was deeper, more instinctual. It was like something was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't quite grab hold of it. Then, out of nowhere, Tom walked up to me. "Hey," he said casually, like we were best friends. "How's it going?" I looked up, trying to hide the tension in my face. "It's good. Just watching the presentation." "Yeah, Lena's great at what she does," he said, his smile almost too charming. "Too easy. Smart. Driven. Knows how to get things done." I nodded, trying to keep it together. "Yeah, she's good at everything." Tom seemed to find my response amusing. He leaned in just a little closer. "Yeah, I've noticed. She's really impressive." His eyes flicked back to Lena, still talking to the crowd. "You know, she's really something." There it was again. The way he said something. The way his eyes lingered on her. The way his tone shifted when he spoke about her. Like it was all part of some private conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I could feel my hands tighten around my drink. My jaw was clenched, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "I think you're overestimating it. She's just doing her job." He gave me a half smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Right, just doing her job. But, you know, there's more to it than that. It's impressive, the way she handles herself. All that confidence. I'm sure you've noticed, huh?" I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to respond. What was he trying to imply? Was he really trying to get me to admit that I was just some guy lucky enough to be with her? Before I could say anything, Lena finished her presentation, and the crowd broke into applause. I quickly turned my attention to her, but I could still feel Tom's eyes on me, watching, waiting for something to happen. Lena made her way toward me, her face lighting up with that genuine smile that always made my heart skip a beat. She was happy, proud of herself, and I couldn't let anything ruin that. "Not tonight." "Did you hear the applause?" she said, her voice full of excitement. "I think I nailed it." "You did," I replied, trying to push aside the unease that was clawing at me. "You were amazing." But even as I said it, my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't forget the way Tom had looked at her, the way he kept circling around her, trying to be a part of her world. And for the first time, I realized something. It wasn't just about being around her. He was testing me, pushing me, trying to see how far he could go without crossing a line. And I realized, deep down, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He was playing a game, and I was going to make sure he lost. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of meaningless conversations and polite smiles. Lena was glowing after her presentation, basking in the admiration of her colleagues. She was radiant, and I was proud of her. But no matter how much I tried to focus on her achievements, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was simmering beneath the surface, something I couldn't control. Tom was still in the room, of course. I could feel his presence even when I wasn't looking directly at him. He seemed to move through the crowd effortlessly, always just a few steps away from where Lena was. It was subtle, the way he lingered near her when he didn't need to, the way he made sure to join conversations she was part of, the way he'd smile at me like he knew something I didn't. At one point, I excused myself from a conversation with some of Lena's colleagues. I needed some air. I needed to clear my head. I found a quiet corner by the windows, staring out over the city. The lights were beautiful, but I wasn't really seeing them. My mind was racing, replaying every interaction between Lena and Tom, every subtle exchange. What was his game? And why was I feeling this way? I wasn't the jealous type. At least, I didn't think I was. But tonight, something felt off. It wasn't just the way Tom kept showing up around Lena. It was the feeling that she might not even notice it. Maybe she was too wrapped up in her work, in her own success, to see the subtle manipulation that was unfolding right before her eyes. I wasn't used to being paranoid. I wasn't used to watching my wife, scrutinizing every moment, wondering if I was being foolish or if my instincts were telling me something I should be paying attention to. But as the night wore on, I found myself slipping further and further into a spiral of doubt. I was so deep in my thoughts that I didn't notice Lena approaching until she was standing right next to me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I turned to her, trying to smile. "Yeah, just needed a minute. It's a lot to take in." Her smile was gentle. "I know. It's been a big night." I nodded, but the words I wanted to say were stuck in my throat. I wanted to tell her what was going on in my head. I wanted to tell her about Tom, about the way he kept inserting himself into her space, about the feeling that was growing inside me like a slow-burning fuse. But I couldn't. Not here. Not like this. Lena, ever the professional, noticed the shift in my mood. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing. I nodded again, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, I'm just tired. It's been a long day." She smiled and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Well, I'll be right back. I just have to wrap up a few things with the team. Why don't you head back to the hotel? I'll meet you there in a bit." It was a simple request, but for some reason, it struck me as off. She was busy, but why didn't she want me around? Why didn't she want to stay with me? I pushed the thought away. It was probably nothing. I was overthinking it. But as Lena walked away, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. And that's when I saw it again, Tom. He was standing at the far end of the room, looking directly at her, watching her walk away. And when his gaze met mine, I felt it. That same challenge. That same unsettling look, like he was daring me to do something, to say something. It was subtle, but it was there. This wasn't just about corporate pleasantries anymore. Tom was pushing boundaries, testing limits. And he was doing it right under my nose. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not this time. I walked toward him, my steps firm, my heart racing. He saw me coming and didn't even flinch. In fact, he smiled, that same smug, knowing smile. "Isn't she amazing?" he asked, as if we were having a casual conversation about the weather. "I mean, you're a lucky guy." I stopped a few feet away from him, my fists clenched at my sides. "Listen," I said, my voice low but firm. "You need to stay the hell away from my wife." His smile faltered just a fraction, but only for a moment. Then he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Relax. I'm just giving her the attention she deserves. A woman like that. She needs someone who appreciates what she's capable of." "I appreciate her just fine," I said, narrowing my eyes. "But you need to understand something. Stay away from her. If you push any further, there will be consequences." Tom's eyes gleamed with amusement, but there was something else there too, something dark. "Consequences? I think you're taking this a little too seriously, my friend. I'm just having a conversation. Don't worry. I know my place." "You don't know anything." I shot back, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "You've been playing games all night. And trust me, this is the last time you try anything like that with her." For a moment, it seemed like he was considering something. Maybe sizing me up, maybe thinking I was bluffing. But then he just shrugged, that same smile curling on his lips. "Okay," he said casually, his tone almost dismissive. "If you say so." I turned away, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure if I had won, or if I had just stirred something up that would come back to bite me later. But for now, I had made myself clear. Tom wouldn't get away with it. I wasn't going to let him. As I made my way back toward Lena, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something that was about to change everything. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of chatter and clinking glasses. I tried to focus on Lena, who was now surrounded by colleagues, her eyes bright as she discussed the details of her presentation. She was so wrapped up in the excitement of the evening, she hadn't noticed how much I was spiraling inside. I kept my distance, pretending to engage with the others while keeping an eye on Tom. He was still around, always lurking in the background, always just a little too close to Lena. And though he made no direct moves after our conversation, I could feel the tension between us building like a storm on the horizon. I found myself excusing myself once more, retreating to a quieter corner of the venue. The noise of the crowd, the laughter, and the endless conversations only made my thoughts louder. Was I being unreasonable? I was starting to question myself. Maybe I was imagining things. After all, Lena was an independent woman, and she had every right to talk to whomever she wanted. But there was something about Tom that unsettled me. As I stared out the window, trying to calm my racing thoughts, I felt a presence behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "You okay?" Lena's voice was soft, full of concern. She had that way of sensing when something was off. I didn't turn around immediately. I just stood there, my hands in my pockets. Yeah, just needed a break. Come on, she said, her voice coaxing. You've been quiet all night. Let's go get some fresh air, okay? Her words were like a lifeline, and I found myself nodding. I needed to clear my head, away from the noise, away from the feeling that something was slipping out of my control. We made our way outside into the crisp night air. The streets were quieter here, and for the first time all evening, I could breathe again. Lena walked beside me, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. Talk to me, she said after a moment. You've been acting strange. I hesitated. I wanted to tell her everything, about Tom, about the way he'd been hovering around her, about the way he had looked at me earlier. But I didn't want to ruin the night. I didn't want her to feel like she had to choose between me and her career. It's nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired, I guess. It's a lot to take in. She didn't seem convinced, but she didn't push further. Instead, she took my hand, squeezing it lightly. You know I'm here, right? You don't have to carry everything alone. I nodded, grateful for her support, but the unease I felt earlier hadn't gone away. If anything, it had only intensified. It wasn't just about Tom anymore. It was about me, and the fact that I was starting to feel like I was losing something I couldn't get back. As we walked back inside, I saw him again. Tom. He was standing near the bar, watching us as we approached. His gaze flicked between Lena and me, that same unsettling look in his eyes. It was a challenge, pure and simple, and I wasn't about to back down. The moment I walked back into the room, I knew things had shifted. There was a subtle change in the atmosphere. Lena was still chatting with some colleagues, but my eyes were locked on Tom. He was at the bar again, looking at me, and this time, there was no hiding it. He wasn't pretending to be casual. He was making sure I saw him watching. Lena was talking about the evening's events, her animated voice cutting through the background noise. I wasn't really listening anymore. My thoughts were consumed by one thing, Tom. I had tried to tell myself it was just my paranoia, just a product of overthinking. But this wasn't paranoia. This was real. Tom had made his move, and I wasn't about to let him continue testing me. I could feel the tension rising in my chest, the familiar feeling of anxiety gripping me. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there and let him get away with it. Without even realizing it, I started walking toward him. My steps were quick, firm. My heart was pounding, my mind set on one thing: confronting him once and for all. He had been playing with fire all night, and it was time for him to get burned. As I reached the bar, Tom looked up, his lips curling into that same, almost smug grin. Back for another drink? He asked, his voice too casual, too unaffected. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned in closer, close enough that only he could hear me. You need to stay away from my wife, I said, my voice low but sharp. He didn't flinch. In fact, he leaned in a little as well, as if enjoying the tension between us. What? You think I'm trying to steal her away from you? He asked, his tone amused. Relax, man. I'm just having a conversation. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't fooling me. This wasn't about conversation. This was about something much deeper. It was a game for him, a dangerous one, and I was done playing by his rules. I'm not playing around, Tom, I said, my voice a little louder now. You've been hovering around her all night. You think I haven't noticed? This is your warning. Stay away from her. Now. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, almost like he was surprised I was finally standing up to him. But then he just shrugged, the smile never leaving his face. Fine. No need to get upset, he said, his voice still smooth, still full of that arrogance that made me want to punch him in the face. I was just being friendly. But if that's what you want. I stood there for a moment, watching him, making sure he got the message. But the way he looked at me, the way he didn't back down, told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I turned away and started walking back to Lena, I felt the weight of what had just happened. I had confronted him, but I knew that was only the beginning. Tom was playing a game with me, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not now. Lena was still talking to a group of her colleagues, laughing, unaware of the storm that was brewing just a few steps away from her. I forced a smile, hoping I could hold it together for her. But the truth was, I was unraveling. I didn't know how much longer I could keep my cool. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Tom continue pushing his luck. He had crossed the line, and now he was going to find out just how far I was willing to go to protect what was mine. I watched Lena interact with her colleagues, still unaware of the silent battle that was unfolding right under her nose. She was in her element, confident and radiant as she talked about the future of her team, her eyes lighting up with passion. And for a brief moment, I felt like the luckiest guy in the room. She was mine, and no one was going to take that away from me. But then, there was Tom. I couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop replaying the way he'd looked at me, like he was daring me to make a move. I knew it wasn't over. His smirk haunted me, and I could feel the tension in the room tightening. I tried to focus on Lena, on her excitement and the success she was experiencing tonight. But every time I looked over at her, my eyes would inevitably drift to Tom, who was always just a little too close. He'd move from one group to another, always near her, always positioning himself so that his presence lingered just long enough to make me uncomfortable. At some point, Lena excused herself from her colleagues, making her way toward the bar to get a drink. I followed her, trying to keep my nerves in check. When I reached her, I could see that she was smiling, but there was a slight edge to her expression. She could feel the shift in the air, even if she didn't fully understand it. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking me over with a raised eyebrow. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just a little tired. It's a lot to take in." She didn't seem convinced, but didn't press further. "Well, I think we should head out soon. I'm getting a bit overwhelmed by all the chatter." I agreed, relieved that she was ready to leave. But just as we were about to step away from the bar, I saw him again. Tom was standing nearby, his eyes locked on us. He had this cold, calculating look in his gaze, like he was trying to figure out our next move. The way he watched us, especially Lena, was unmistakable, and that look sent a wave of unease through me. I felt a sudden surge of protectiveness, and without thinking, I stepped forward, putting myself between Tom and Lena. He didn't flinch, didn't even seem surprised by my move. Instead, he just stared at me, his lips curling into that smug smile. "You really think you can control everything, don't you?" Tom said, his voice low, almost too casual. It was like he was testing me again, trying to see how far I would let him push. I squared my shoulders, standing tall. "You need to back off, Tom," I said, my voice firm. "This is your last warning." For a moment, he didn't respond. His eyes flicked toward Lena, who was looking confused now, trying to understand what was happening. Then, with a slow shake of his head, Tom shrugged. "Relax. I'm just making sure she's not alone in all this. You can't expect her to handle everything on her own, can you?" The nerve of him. The audacity. He was blatantly insinuating that I wasn't enough for Lena, that I couldn't offer her the support she needed. But I wasn't going to let him manipulate me, not in front of her. "This isn't about support, Tom," I said through gritted teeth. "This is about respect. And you've crossed a line." There was a brief silence between us, a heavy one. I could feel the tension building in the air, and I was sure Lena could sense it too. She stepped closer to me, her eyes flicking between me and Tom. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with confusion. I looked at her, trying to find the right words. "Tom's been making things uncomfortable tonight. I just want him to back off. That's all." She glanced at Tom, who was still standing there with his usual arrogant smirk. "I didn't realize. I'm sorry if he's made you feel that way." Tom just laughed, shaking his head. "Don't worry about it, Lena. I'm just looking out for you. He's clearly the one who has the problem." Lena's gaze softened, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't know the full story, not yet. But I wasn't going to let it go any further. I turned to Lena, my hand on her arm. "Let's go," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "We're leaving." She hesitated for a moment, but then nodded, taking my hand as we walked away. As we passed Tom, I could feel his eyes on us, that unsettling gaze following us every step of the way. The night was far from over, and I knew Tom wouldn't let this go. But I was done playing nice. He had pushed his luck one too many times, and I was about to show him that he had made the wrong choice. We left the event early. The cool air outside felt like a breath of fresh air after the suffocating tension that had been building all night. Lena walked beside me, still unaware of everything that had been happening with Tom. I could feel her hand in mine, but there was a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the frustration over Tom, but the nagging feeling that something was off with her too. Lena had always been confident, independent. That's why I loved her so much. But tonight, There was something about her that had shifted in my eyes. It wasn't just the way she'd been oblivious to Tom's advances. It was the way she seemed so wrapped up in her own success, so absorbed by the attention she was getting, that she hadn't noticed the discomfort in me, the subtle things that made my heart race with anxiety. As we walked to the car, she tried to lighten the mood. "I'm glad we left early," she said, smiling up at me. "It's been a crazy night." I nodded, my thoughts still clouded. "Yeah, it was, a lot." Lena gave me a concerned glance. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem distant tonight." I hesitated before responding. "I'm fine. Just didn't feel right, you know?" Her expression softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be caught up in everything. You know how these events can be." I didn't answer immediately, just focused on driving. The silence between us was heavy, but not because of what she thought. No, the silence was because I was trying to figure out just how much I should tell her. How much of tonight's events did I reveal? The truth was, I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't keep letting this go. By the time we reached home, I had made my decision. It was time to face everything. The betrayal of my own trust, the realization that I had been taken for granted, and the fact that the man I had been fighting all night was never the real enemy. It was Lena. As we stepped into our apartment, I turned to face her. She looked at me with an expression of concern, but I could see the trace of guilt in her eyes. Maybe she was already sensing that something wasn't right. "Sit down, Lena," I said, my voice firm. Her eyes widened slightly, but she sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What's going on?" I stood in front of her, my heart pounding. "I know what happened tonight. I know about you and Tom." She froze, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you talking about?" I crossed my arms, my voice steady despite the rising anger inside me. "I saw the way you looked at him, Lena. I saw the way you reacted to him. Don't think I didn't notice." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "You didn't have to say anything. I already know. I've known for a while. This wasn't just a work event for you. It was about something else, something I wasn't a part of." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands, her face flushed with shame. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. Tom and it wasn't what you think." I shook my head. "You don't have to lie to me, Lena. I saw the way you reacted to him, the way you let him in. He was pushing boundaries all night, and you didn't stop him. You let him do it." She bit her lip, her shoulders shaking with guilt. "I was just overwhelmed. It's hard sometimes, trying to balance everything. I didn't realize how much it was affecting you." I stared at her, the anger slowly giving way to something else. Something painful. "You didn't realize? You didn't realize how much I was hurting? How much I was watching, feeling like I was invisible next to you." She stood up, rushing toward me. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. You're my husband, and I love you. But tonight, it's been hard for me too. You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Maybe I don't understand everything, Lena, but I do understand one thing. You've been playing a dangerous game, and I'm done being your safety net." The silence in the room was deafening. I had said everything I needed to say, and in that moment, I knew that I was done. I wasn't going to stand by and let her walk all over me, letting men like Tom get too close, testing my patience until it ran out. Lena looked at me, her face crumpling as she started to cry. "Please don't do this. I need you." I shook my head. "I need to be respected. I need to trust the person I'm with. And right now, that's not happening." I walked to the door, my back turned to her. "I'm done, Lena. You can figure out what comes next." As I stepped into the hallway, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. The lies, the games, the manipulation. It had all been too much, and now I was finally free. What happened next wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. It was about understanding my own worth and not settling for a relationship that didn't value me. Tom had pushed his luck, yes, but in the end, it was Lena who had tested my patience one too many times. And now, the consequences would be hers to face. As I walked away, the sting of betrayal was still there, but it was tempered by the certainty that I had taken control of my own life. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.